So if you're watching this video, you probably know at least a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy, and one of the scariest strategies is that people can understand the principles reasonably well, but they find themselves having a hard time practicing it is something called stimulus control. And if you don't know what stimulus control is, essentially the idea behind stimulus control is that we want to associate the bed with sleep again, where people with insomnia tend to have associated their bed with wake because they're spending so much time in bed frustrated, awake, in distress, tossing and turning and worrying that of course, like just like Pavlov's dog and the ringing of the bell, the bed has become a sort of signal for wakefulness. So unsurprisingly, the strategy stimulus control basically says, hey, like we don't want to be spending too much time in bed, awake and ruminating and doing all that jazz. So you want to only use the bed for sleep and you want to get out of bed if sleep is not coming. And this is, of course, very, very scary for people with insomnia. They're like, oh my gosh, like if I get out of bed, what if I never fall asleep again? Like that's going to be horrible, or it's just going to be such a painful experience. And they want to rip off the band-aid. They want to try the strategy, but the anxiety just gets to them. And what's kind of the alternative? If you don't know me, hi, my name is Dr. Parky Lau. I'm a clinical psychologist and behavioral sleep medicine specialist. I've treated hundreds of different patients with insomnia, typically successfully, and I've also written a self-help book. It's called The Insomnia Paradox, and it teaches you the CBT strategies to become your own cognitive behavioral therapist for your own insomnia problem. So at a very fundamental level, the point of stimulus control is to reassociate the bed with sleep and break that association between the bed and wake and other kind of weird negative feelings that are not very conducive to sleep. So technically, the point of stimulus control and the actions of stimulus control of getting out of bed and only coming back to bed when they're sleepy doesn't necessarily have to be the case. It doesn't have to be the only pathway to reassociating the bed with a sense of security and stability and safety that would allow for sleep to naturally unfold. And this is where something called counter control comes in. Counter control basically says, hey, like, I don't really need to get out of bed to be able to reassociate the bed with a sense of comfort and relaxation. As long as I maybe, sit up, have my pillow kind of behind me and do something kind of enjoyable, like read a book or listen to some music, rather than kind of like tossing and turning, feeling frustrated, that in and of itself is going to be really helpful for reassociating the bed with sort of these more positive, pleasant feelings that are more conducive for sleep. And the research suggests that counter control and stimulus control are fairly comparable in terms of their efficacy when it comes to treatment of insomnia. And the sort of distinction here is that stimulus control seems to be better at helping people fall asleep quicker, whereas counter control might even be better for these middle of the night awakenings so that you don't have to get out of the bed in the middle of the night, but you can actually stay there as long as you're kind of like maybe in a slightly different position compared to when you're sleeping and you're doing something enjoyable and relaxing. So counter control can be a nice, comfortable alternative to stimulus control if you find there are certain reasons why it's really hard to get out of bed, whether it's because of like just extreme sleep anxiety or just like, oh my gosh, the idea of getting out of there just feels so painful. Maybe outside is so cold and such a horrible experience, or maybe you're someone who has a risk of falling. Maybe you take certain medication or certain medical conditions or physical ailments or age that lead to potential issues of getting out of bed, or maybe you just live in a place where it's kind of hard to get out of your bedroom at night. Maybe you live with like 10 other roommates and that's a bit tricky. So all of those things can help to support counter control as a very useful alternative. And of course, just like with stimulus control, for counter control as well, you need to wake up at the same time every day in spite of how the night was the previous night in terms of your overall sleep quality and quantity. Make sure that you're getting up at the same time regardless. And then over the next night, as you're kind of experiencing the next night and going through your day, you're going to have extra sleep pressure to really reap the benefits of all the great work that you're doing with either stimulus control or counter control. And as a reward for those of you who are still with me, I'm happy to provide a free template for treatment of insomnia guide that I created. Feel free to just put insomnia somewhere in the below in the comment section, and I'm happy to give it to you free of charge. Thanks for watching as always. Take good care. Bye-bye.